The iron had burned so deep into Catherine Porter's left shoulder blade that the scar tissue formed ridges you could trace with your fingertips. And when Isaac Donovan first saw it gleaming pale against her sun-kissed skin in the dim lamplight of the boarding house room, his blood turned to ice water in his veins. It was late September in 1878, and Leadville, Colorado had exploded from a sleepy mining camp into a roaring city of 15,000 souls practically overnight after the silver strikes began. Catherine had arrived on the afternoon stage 3 days prior, her traveling dress dusty from the journey, her dark brown hair pinned up in a style that suggested Eastern refinement, despite the weariness etched into her features. She carried only a single carpet bag and wore gloves despite the lingering warmth of early autumn, which Isaac found curious when he first noticed her stepping down from the coach. Isaac had been delivering supplies to the general store when he saw her, and something in the set of her shoulders, the way she held her chin high despite the obvious exhaustion, caught his attention. He was 26 years old, weathered beyond his years from a decade of cowpunching and cattle drives, with dark hair that curled at his collar and eyes the color of creek water after a storm. He had come to Leadville not for silver, but because the mining boom meant the surrounding ranches needed experienced hands to supply beef to the endless stream of miners, and steady work beat chasing half-wild longhorns across the Texas plains. Catherine checked into Mrs. Henderson's boarding house, the only respectable establishment in town for single women, and for 2 days, Isaac found excuses to walk past the place, hoping for another glimpse of the mysterious woman with the sad eyes. On the third evening, he finally worked up the courage to approach her as she sat on the front porch in the cooling twilight, a shawl wrapped around her shoulders despite the mild temperature. "Evening, miss," he said, removing his hat in a gesture his mother had drilled into him before she passed. "I am Isaac Donovan. I apologize if this is forward, but I noticed you arrived recently, and Leadville can be an overwhelming place for newcomers. If you need any assistance finding work or getting your bearings, I would be honored to help." Catherine looked up at him with eyes so green they reminded him of spring grass, and for a moment he thought she might send him away. But then her expression softened slightly, and she gestured to the chair beside her. "Catherine Porter," she said quietly. "And I appreciate your kindness, Mr. Donovan, though I wonder what makes you think I need assistance." "Just a feeling," Isaac admitted, settling into the chair. "And please call me Isaac. This town is growing so fast that folks who arrived last week act like old-timers. Seems important to make real connections when you can." They talked until full dark fell over the mountains, their conversation flowing easier than Isaac expected. Catherine revealed she had come from Kansas, though she offered few details about her reasons for leaving. Isaac told her about the ranch where he worked, the double T spread run by a fair-minded owner named Thomas Thatcher, who treated his hands with respect. When Catherine mentioned she was looking for work, Isaac immediately thought of the ranch. "Thomas Thatcher's wife Emily is always saying she needs help with the house," he said. "It is a big operation, and she manages the domestic side while Thomas runs the cattle. The pay would be fair, and it is a sight more peaceful than town. Would you be interested if I asked on your behalf?" Something flickered across Catherine's face, a mix of hope and fear that Isaac could not quite interpret. "I would be grateful," she said finally. "But I should tell you, I do not have references. I left my previous situation rather suddenly." "Everyone has their reasons for starting fresh," Isaac said. "Out here, what matters is what you do moving forward, not what you left behind." 2 days later, Catherine was settling into a small but clean room in the ranch house, and Emily Thatcher was already singing her praises. Catherine worked with quiet efficiency, taking on cooking, mending, and cleaning with a skill that suggested she had been well trained in domestic arts. But Isaac noticed things that troubled him. The way she always wore high-necked dresses despite the warm autumn days, how she flinched at sudden movements, the shadows that haunted her eyes when she thought no one was watching. He found himself drawn to her despite, or perhaps because of, the mystery she represented. During meals in the ranch house where the hands ate together, Isaac made sure to sit where he could see her moving in and out of the kitchen. He volunteered for any task that might bring him near the house, earning ribbing from the other cowboys about his sudden interest in domestic chores. "You have got it bad, Donovan," said Pete, a grizzled hand who had been working cattle since before Isaac was born. "That Porter girl has you roped and tied, and she probably does not even know it." Isaac could not deny it. Catherine had indeed captured his attention completely, though they had exchanged only brief conversations in the weeks since her arrival. She remained friendly but distant, always maintaining a careful space between herself and others. Isaac respected her boundaries even as he longed to understand what had put such wariness in her eyes. October brought the first real cold, and the ranch hands worked long days preparing for winter, moving cattle to lower pastures and reinforcing buildings against the harsh weather that would soon arrive. One evening, Isaac was returning to the bunkhouse after checking on a mare who was close to foaling when he heard a cry from near the creek. He ran toward the sound and found Catherine kneeling on the bank, her shawl soaked and her hair falling loose around her shoulders. "I dropped the water bucket," she said, her voice shaking. "I tried to catch it before it went downstream and I slipped." Isaac helped her up, noting that she was shivering violently in the cold night air. "We need to get you warm immediately," he said. "The bunkhouse is closer than the main house." "Can you walk?" She nodded, and he supported her weight as they made their way to the small building. The other hands were in town for the evening, leaving the place empty. Isaac quickly stoked the fire in the pot-bellied stove and grabbed a blanket from his bunk. "You need to get out of those wet clothes," he said, turning his back to give her privacy. "There is a spare shirt in my trunk you can wear." He heard her moving behind him, the rustle of wet fabric being removed, and then a long silence. When he finally turned around, uncertain if something was wrong, he found her standing with her back to him, the borrowed shirt clutched to her chest but not yet put on. And there, stark and brutal against her pale skin, was the brand. It was roughly 3 inches across, the letters JM burned into the flesh of her left shoulder blade with deliberate cruelty. The scar was old, at least a year or two based on the way it had healed, but the sight of it hit Isaac like a physical blow. Someone had marked her like an animal, had claimed ownership of her body with fire and pain. Catherine seemed to sense his presence behind her and quickly pulled the shirt over her head, but it was too late. Isaac had seen, and the fury rising in his chest threatened to choke him. He took several deep breaths, forcing himself to remain calm as Catherine turned to face him, her eyes wide with something that looked like terror. "Please," she whispered, "please do not tell anyone." Isaac closed the distance between them slowly, giving her time to move away if she wished. She stayed frozen in place as he reached out and gently touched her shoulder, his fingers resting just above where he knew the brand marred her skin. "Who did this to you?" His voice came out rough with barely contained rage. "Who burned you like cattle?" Tears spilled down Catherine's cheeks, and she seemed to crumble before him. Isaac caught her as her knees buckled, gathering her into his arms and holding her while she sobbed against his chest. He stroked her hair and murmured soothing words, the same way he would gentle a frightened horse, until the storm of tears finally subsided. They sat together by the fire, Catherine wrapped in the blanket and Isaac sitting close enough to offer comfort but not so close as to crowd her. And slowly, haltingly, she told him everything. Her name was indeed Catherine Porter, and she had grown up on a farm in eastern Kansas, the only daughter of decent people who had died of fever when she was 17. With no other family and no means to support herself, she had taken a position as a housekeeper for a wealthy landowner named Jerome Mitchell. For 6 months, the arrangement had been satisfactory. Mitchell was often away on business, and Catherine managed his household efficiently. But then, Mitchell returned from a trip to Texas with ideas about branding his property, and his definition of property included the young woman working in his house. He had been drinking with business associates, boasting about his cattle operations, when someone joked that he should brand his pretty housekeeper to make sure she did not run off. And Jerome Mitchell, drunk and cruel, had decided to do exactly that. He heated the iron in the fireplace, Catherine said, her voice flat and emotionless as she recounted the horror. 2 of his men held me down while he did it. He said it was so I would always remember who I belonged to, that I would never be able to hide what I was. Afterward, he told me if I tried to leave or went to the law, he would kill me. He owned half the county, including the sheriff, so I believed him. Isaac's hands were clenched so tight his nails bit into his palms. How did you get away? Mitchell went on another business trip, to Denver this time. I stole enough money to buy a stage ticket and left in the middle of the night. I have been terrified every day since that he would find me, that someone would see the brand and know what I was running from. She looked up at Isaac with devastated eyes. I am damaged goods, Isaac. I am marked like livestock, and I can never be free of it. No. Isaac cupped her face gently in his hands, forcing her to meet his gaze. You are not damaged. You are not property. You are a brave woman who survived something unspeakable and had the courage to escape. That brand does not define you, Catherine. It is just a scar, and scars are proof that we survived, that we healed. How can you say that? She whispered. How can you even look at me? I look at you and see someone strong, Isaac said fiercely. I see someone beautiful and kind and worth knowing. And I swear to you, Catherine, on my life and on everything I hold sacred, that Jerome Mitchell will pay for what he did to you. I will make sure he never hurts you or anyone else again. Catherine shook her head frantically. No, you cannot go after him. He is too powerful, too connected. He would kill you, Isaac. Please, I could not bear it if you were hurt because of me. Then what? Isaac demanded. We just pretend this never happened. We let him get away with it. We survive, Catherine said firmly. We live our lives and refuse to let him win by destroying our futures. That is the only revenge that matters. Isaac wanted to argue, wanted to saddle his horse that very moment and ride to Kansas to make Jerome Mitchell pay in blood for what he had done. But the plea in Catherine's eyes stopped him. She had already been through so much, had shown such incredible strength in escaping and building a new life. He had no right to make decisions that would affect her safety without her consent. All right, he said finally. I will not go after him, not yet. But if he ever comes looking for you, if he ever tries to hurt you again, I will end him. That is not negotiable. Catherine nodded, fresh tears streaming down her face, and Isaac pulled her back into his arms. They stayed that way for a long time, the fire crackling beside them and the wind howling outside the bunkhouse walls. Something fundamental had shifted between them in those moments of revelation and comfort. Isaac had suspected he was falling in love with Catherine Porter, but now he knew it with absolute certainty. And from the way she clung to him, her fingers twisted in his shirt, he dared to hope she might feel the same. When Catherine's clothes had dried enough for her to return to the main house without catching her death, Isaac walked her back, their hands linked in the darkness. At the kitchen door, she turned to him, rose on her tiptoes, and pressed a soft kiss to his cheek. "Thank you," she whispered, "for seeing me as more than a scar." "Always," Isaac promised. From that night forward, their relationship deepened and blossomed like wildflowers after rain. Isaac courted Catherine properly, with Emily Thatcher serving as delighted chaperone. He brought Catherine small gifts from town: ribbons for her hair, a book of poetry she admired in the mercantile window, a bottle of perfume that smelled of roses. They took walks along the creek in the evenings, talking about everything and nothing, building the foundation of real intimacy. Isaac told her about his childhood in Missouri, how he had lost his parents young and headed west to make his own way. He spoke of lonely nights under the stars during cattle drives, of the violence and beauty of life on the frontier, of dreams he had once thought too foolish to voice about finding a place to call home and someone to share it with. Catherine opened up gradually about her life before Jerome Mitchell destroyed her sense of safety, sharing memories of her parents and the simple joy of growing up on a farm. She had loved reading and learning, had once dreamed of becoming a teacher. "That seems impossible now," she said sadly. "How could I stand in front of a classroom knowing what is marked on my back?" "You could do anything you set your mind to," Isaac insisted. "That brand does not change who you are, Catherine. It does not diminish your intelligence or your worth or your dreams." November brought snow to the high country, and the ranch settled into winter routines. The hands spent more time in the barns and less out on the range, caring for livestock and making repairs. Isaac used every spare moment to be near Catherine, and even the other cowboys stopped teasing him about it, recognizing that what existed between Isaac and Catherine was something real and worth respecting. Thomas and Emily Thatcher noticed as well, and one evening after dinner, Thomas pulled Isaac aside. "I have been watching you with Miss Porter," the rancher said, his weathered face kind. "Your intentions are serious, I take it?" "Yes, sir," Isaac said without hesitation. "I love her. I intend to ask her to marry me if she will have me." Thomas nodded approvingly. "She is a fine woman, and you are a good man, Isaac. You have my blessing for what it is worth, but there is something you should know. A man came through town last week asking questions about a woman matching Catherine's description. He was from Kansas, well-dressed, throwing money around. The sheriff told him he had not seen anyone like that, but I thought you should be aware." Ice flooded Isaac's veins. "Did you get his name?" "He did not offer it, but I did some asking around. Apparently he works for a man named Jerome Mitchell." The rage Isaac had been suppressing since learning about Catherine's brand roared back to life. Mitchell had sent someone to find her, which meant he had not forgotten about the woman who had escaped him. Catherine was not safe, might never be truly safe while Mitchell lived. That night, Isaac told Catherine about the man asking questions, and he watched her face drain of color. "He is looking for me," she said, her voice barely audible. "He will not stop until he finds me." "Then we leave," Isaac said decisively. "We go somewhere he cannot follow, somewhere we can start fresh." "Where?" Catherine asked desperately. "He has money and influence. He will keep searching." "Then I remove the reason he is searching," Isaac said grimly. "I go to Kansas and I make sure Jerome Mitchell can never hurt you again." "No," Catherine grabbed his arms. "Isaac, please, you cannot. I will not let you throw your life away for revenge." "It is not revenge," Isaac said fiercely. "It is protection. It is making sure the woman I love can live without fear." Catherine went very still. "The woman you love." Isaac realized what he had said, and rather than backtrack, he doubled down. He took both her hands in his and looked directly into those green eyes that haunted his dreams. "Yes, Catherine, I love you. I have loved you since the first moment I saw you step off that stage, and every day since has only made it stronger. I love your strength and your courage and your kindness. I love the way you laugh at my terrible jokes, and the way you hum while you work, and the way you see the good in people even after everything you have been through. I love you, and I will not stand by while you live in fear. Tears were streaming down Catherine's face again, but she was smiling through them. I love you too, she whispered. I was afraid to say it, afraid to let myself hope that I could have something good after everything that happened, but I love you, Isaac Donovan, with everything I am. They kissed then, a sweet and desperate meeting of lips that sealed promises neither had dared to make. When they finally broke apart, breathless and overwhelmed, Catherine rested her forehead against Isaac's chest. I cannot let you go after Mitchell, she said quietly. But I also cannot keep running forever. So what do we do? Isaac thought hard, weighing options and risks. Finally, he said, we get married. We make it legal and binding, and then we go to the territorial marshal. We make a formal complaint about what Mitchell did, get it on the record. Mitchell may have influence in Kansas, but this is Colorado, and if he comes here threatening my wife, he will face justice under our laws. Will that be enough? Catherine asked doubtfully. It has to be, Isaac said, but I also think we should talk to Thomas. He has connections throughout the territory, and he is a fair man. He will help us if we ask. Thomas Thatcher proved to be exactly the ally they needed. When Isaac and Catherine explained the situation the next day, leaving nothing out, the rancher's face darkened with anger. That is barbaric, he growled. To mark a woman like that, to claim ownership of another human being, that man deserves to hang. I want to marry Catherine, Isaac said. With your permission, I would like to do it soon, before Mitchell's man figures out she is here. You have my permission and my support, Thomas said immediately. Emily will be thrilled. But more than that, I am going to write to some people I know. Mitchell may have power in Kansas, but I know the territorial governor and several federal marshals. We are going to make sure there is a record of what he did, and if he comes to Colorado looking for trouble, he will find more than he bargained for. They were married a week later in Leadville's small church, with Emily weeping happy tears and Thomas standing proud as he gave Catherine away. Catherine wore a dress Emily had helped her make, pale blue with long sleeves and a high neck that covered the brand, though Isaac had told her again and again that the scar did not matter to him. She was beautiful in a way that made his chest ache, and when she said her vows, her voice strong and clear, Isaac knew he was the luckiest man alive. The wedding night was tender and careful, both of them nervous and eager in equal measure. Isaac made sure Catherine knew she was cherished, that every part of her was beautiful to him. When she finally let him see the brand again, no longer trying to hide it, he traced the letters gently with his fingertips and then leaned down to press a soft kiss to the scarred skin. I swear to you, he murmured against her shoulder, that you will never be hurt like this again. I swear I will spend my life making sure you know you are loved, that you are precious, that you are free. Catherine turned in his arms and kissed him deeply, and they made love with a passion and tenderness that left them both shaken. Afterward, lying tangled together in the darkness of their small cabin that Thomas had given them as a wedding gift, Catherine traced patterns on Isaac's chest. I never thought I could have this, she said softly. After Mitchell branded me, I thought my life was over, that I would never be anything more than damaged and ashamed. But you make me feel whole again, Isaac. You make me feel like I can have a future. You can have anything you want, Isaac promised. We will build that future together. Winter deepened and passed into early spring with no further sign of Mitchell or his men. Thomas's letters to his contacts, had resulted in warrants being issued for Jerome Mitchell in Colorado Territory on charges of assault and false imprisonment based on Catherine's testimony. If Mitchell crossed into Colorado, he would be arrested immediately. The news gave Catherine a measure of peace, though Isaac could tell she still lived with a thread of fear that Mitchell would find some way around the law. In March, that fear became reality when a group of 4 men rode up to the Double T Ranch, demanding to speak with Catherine Donovan. Isaac was out with the herd when it happened, and by the time someone rode out to fetch him, the situation had escalated. Thomas Thatcher stood on his front porch with a rifle, facing down the 4 men, while Emily kept Catherine safe inside the house. Isaac rode in hard, his horse lathered and blowing, and dismounted with his own rifle in hand. The leader of the 4 men was older, somewhere in his 40s, with cold eyes and an expensive suit that marked him as someone used to power. "Are you Isaac Donovan?" the man asked. "I am," Isaac said, moving to stand beside Thomas. "And you are trespassing on private property." "My name is Leonard Shaw, and I represent Jerome Mitchell of Kansas. He has asked me to retrieve something that belongs to him." "Nothing here belongs to Jerome Mitchell," Isaac said flatly. "And if you are referring to my wife, she is a free woman who was never Mitchell's property, no matter what lies he told you. She stole money from Mr. Mitchell and ran away from a legal employment contract," Shaw said smoothly. "He simply wants what is his returned." "She escaped from a man who branded her like livestock," Thomas interjected. "If Mitchell wants to press charges, he can do so through proper legal channels, but I suspect he would rather not have his crimes examined too closely by a judge." Shaw's expression darkened. "Mr. Mitchell is a powerful man with powerful friends. You would be wise to hand over the girl and avoid trouble." "Trouble?" Isaac took a step forward, his grip tightening on the rifle. "You want to talk about trouble? Your employer branded a defenseless woman with hot iron and threatened to kill her if she left. There are warrants out for his arrest in this territory. So I suggest you and your friends ride back to Kansas and tell Jerome Mitchell that if he ever comes near my wife again, if he ever even speaks her name again, I will kill him myself. And that is not a threat, Mr. Shaw. That is a promise." For a long moment, the 2 groups faced off, tension crackling in the air like lightning before a storm. Then Shaw smiled, a cold expression that held no humor. "You have made your position clear, Mr. Donovan. I will convey your message to Mr. Mitchell. But I would not sleep too soundly if I were you." The 4 men rode away, and Isaac immediately went inside to find Catherine. She was pale and shaking, and he gathered her into his arms, holding her tightly while she trembled. "It is all right," he murmured. "They are gone, and they are not coming back." But that night, lying in bed with Catherine curled against his side, Isaac could not shake the feeling that things were not over. Shaw's parting words had been a clear threat, and men like Jerome Mitchell did not give up easily when their pride was wounded. Isaac had meant what he said about killing Mitchell if necessary, but he also knew Catherine was right about the risks. Mitchell had money and influence, resources that could make him a dangerous enemy. The next morning, Isaac rode into Leadville to speak with the territorial marshal, a tough former Army officer named Daniel Wright. Isaac laid out the entire situation, including Shaw's visit and his threats. Wright listened carefully, making notes, and then looked up with hard eyes. "I know men like this, Mitchell," Wright said. "They think money puts them above the law. The warrants we have are solid, but they only apply if he enters Colorado Territory. However, I can send word to the federal marshals in Kansas. Make sure they know what Mitchell has been doing. Sometimes the threat of federal attention is enough to make a man back down." "And if it is not?" Isaac asked. Wright's expression was grim. Then you protect your wife and your property, and you use whatever force is necessary. The law will back you up if you act in self-defense. Isaac returned to the ranch feeling only marginally better. He increased his vigilance, making sure someone was always near the cabin when he had to be away, and he taught Catherine how to shoot, putting a loaded pistol in her hands and making her practice until she could hit a target reliably. She hated the necessity of it, but she understood the stakes. Weeks passed with no further incidents, and slowly they began to relax back into the rhythms of ranch life. Spring brought new calves and long days of work, and Catherine revealed in April that she was pregnant. The joy of that news overshadowed their lingering fears about Mitchell, and Isaac found himself dreaming of their future family with an intensity that surprised him. But in May, everything came to a head when Jerome Mitchell himself arrived in Leadville. Word reached the ranch through one of the hands who had been in town picking up supplies. Mitchell had checked into the best hotel, brought a lawyer, and was making noise about pressing charges against Catherine for theft and breach of contract. Isaac rode into town immediately, finding Marshall Wright already dealing with the situation. The marshal took Isaac aside and explained, "Mitchell is being careful to stay just within the law. He is claiming this is a civil matter, not criminal, and his lawyer is good. But I reminded him about the warrants for assault, and I made it clear that if he tries to approach your wife, I will arrest him on the spot." "Can he really take her to court for theft?" Isaac asked, fear clenching his stomach. "He can try," Wright said. "But with her testimony about the branding and the abuse, no judge would side with him. The problem is the process itself, having Catherine relive the trauma and exposing her to Mitchell again. The man is trying to force you to settle, probably wants money or some kind of public apology." "He will get neither," Isaac said coldly. That evening, as Isaac was preparing to leave town and return to the ranch, a young boy approached him with a message. Jerome Mitchell wanted to meet with him privately. No lawyers, no lawmen, just the two of them talking man to man. Every instinct Isaac had screamed that it was a trap, but he also knew this might be his only chance to end things permanently. He sent word back agreeing to the meeting, but he told Marshall Wright his plans and made sure he was not going in completely unprepared. They met in a private room at Mitchell's hotel, and when Isaac walked in, he got his first look at the man who had brutalized the woman he loved. Jerome Mitchell was in his mid-40s, tall and well-dressed, with graying hair and the kind of face that might have been handsome if not for the cruelty in his eyes. He was drinking whiskey when Isaac entered, and he did not bother to stand or offer any courtesies. "So you are the cowboy who stole my property," Mitchell said, his voice cultured but laced with contempt. "I am the man who married a woman you abused," Isaac replied evenly, refusing to rise to the bait. "Catherine is my wife, not your property, and she never was." Mitchell laughed, an ugly sound. "She was whatever I said she was. I owned her labor, her time, her obedience. When she ran, she broke a contract and stole from me. I am within my rights to seek restitution." "You branded her," Isaac said, his voice shaking with barely controlled fury. "You marked her with hot iron like an animal. There is no contract that gives you the right to do that." "I was protecting my investment," Mitchell said casually, taking another drink, "making sure she understood the terms of our arrangement. It is not my fault she was too stupid to appreciate the position I offered her." Isaac's hands clenched into fists, and it took every ounce of self-control he possessed not to launch himself across the room and beat Mitchell to death with his bare hands. But he had promised Catherine he would not throw his life away, and he meant to keep that promise. "What do you want?" he asked through gritted teeth. $5,000, Mitchell said, "compensation for the money she stole and for the inconvenience of pursuing her. Pay me, and I will drop all charges and leave Colorado. And if I refuse, Mitchell smiled coldly, then we go to court and I make your wife relive every moment of her time in my employment. I will paint her as a thief and a liar, drag her name through the mud until no one in this territory wants anything to do with either of you. Even if she wins, and she might, the cost will be everything she has left of her dignity. Isaac saw the trap clearly. Mitchell knew he could not win in court, not really, but he also knew the process would destroy Catherine. It was extortion, plain and simple, and Mitchell clearly thought Isaac would pay to protect his wife from further trauma. "No," Isaac said quietly. "I will not pay you a single cent." Mitchell's smile vanished. "You are making a mistake, Cowboy." "No, you made the mistake when you thought you could buy your way out of consequences," Isaac said. "My wife will testify about what you did to her, and it will be in the public record for everyone to see. Your friends, your business associates, everyone will know that Jerome Mitchell brands women like cattle. Do you really think your reputation will survive that?" For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Mitchell's face. Isaac pressed his advantage. "You came here thinking you could intimidate us, that we would pay to make you go away. But we are not afraid of you anymore, Mitchell. You have no power here, and if you try to hurt Catherine again, the law will come down on you. And if the law does not, I will." Isaac left the room before Mitchell could respond, his heart pounding but his head clear. He had called Mitchell's bluff, and now they would have to see if the man would fold or double down. The answer came 2 days later when Jerome Mitchell checked out of his hotel and left Leadville without filing any legal actions. Marshal Wright confirmed through his contacts that Mitchell had returned to Kansas, and the word was that some of Mitchell's business partners had gotten wind of the branding accusation and were distancing themselves from him. Apparently, even in 1879 Kansas, there were limits to what polite society would tolerate, and marking a woman with hot iron crossed that line. When Isaac brought the news to Catherine, she collapsed into his arms, sobbing with relief. "It is really over," she asked between tears. "He is truly gone." "He is gone," Isaac confirmed, stroking her hair. "And I do not think he will be back. His reputation has been damaged, and he knows if he comes after you again, he will lose everything." Catherine pulled back to look at Isaac with wonder in her eyes. "You did this. You stood up to him and you won." "We won," Isaac corrected. "Your courage in escaping him, in being willing to testify, that is what gave us the power to fight back. All I did was refuse to let him win." They held each other for a long time, the weight of months of fear finally lifting from their shoulders. That night, lying in bed with Isaac's hand resting protectively on her growing belly, Catherine finally seemed to find peace. "I can breathe again," she whispered. "For the first time since he burned me, I feel like I can actually breathe." The summer of 1879 passed in a haze of contentment as Catherine's pregnancy progressed. She bloomed with the new life growing inside her, her face glowing with health and happiness. Isaac was attentive and devoted, making sure she rested when needed but also respecting her desire to remain active and useful. They talked endlessly about their future, about names for the baby, about dreams they were finally free to pursue. In September, Catherine went into labor on a bright autumn afternoon, and after 12 hours of hard work, she delivered a healthy baby boy. They named him Samuel, after Isaac's father, and Isaac cried when he held his son for the first time. Overwhelmed by the rush of love and protectiveness, he felt for the tiny human in his arms. Catherine recovered well from the birth, and their small cabin filled with the sounds of baby cries and laughter. Thomas and Emily were delighted grandparents in all but name, doting on young Samuel and offering support whenever Isaac and Catherine needed it. The other ranch hands pitched in too, carving toys and helping with chores so Catherine could rest. Life settled into new rhythms centered around their growing family. Isaac took on more responsibility at the ranch, and Thomas eventually made him foreman, recognizing his skills and dedication. With the increased pay, Isaac was able to start saving money toward buying their own land someday, a dream he and Catherine shared. When Samuel was 2 years old, Catherine became pregnant again, and this time she delivered a daughter they named Rose. The little girl had her mother's green eyes and her father's dark curls, and she wrapped everyone around her tiny fingers from the moment she arrived. Samuel was a protective older brother, always wanting to help with the baby, and Isaac would often come home to find his son sitting beside Catherine, watching his sister with serious devotion. The years passed in a blur of joy and hard work. Isaac and Catherine saved diligently, and in 1885 they finally purchased a piece of land adjacent to the Double T Ranch. With help from Thomas and the ranch hands, they built a proper house, larger than the cabin, with enough room for their growing family and the future they were building together. Catherine never forgot what had been done to her, but the scar on her shoulder blade no longer defined her existence. She had proven that she was more than what Jerome Mitchell had tried to make her. That one man's cruelty could not destroy her capacity for love and happiness. She still wore high-necked dresses most days, a habit born of years of hiding, but sometimes in the privacy of their home. She would wear something that left her shoulders bare, a quiet statement of her freedom. Isaac kept his promise to protect her, but more than that, he loved her with a steadiness and devotion that healed wounds deeper than any physical scar. Every day, through words and actions, he showed Catherine that she was precious, that she was valued, that she was loved not despite her past, but because of everything she was. They heard, years later, that Jerome Mitchell had lost most of his wealth in a series of bad investments and had died of a heart attack in 1887. Catherine felt nothing when she learned of his death. No satisfaction or grief, just a distant acknowledgement that the man who had hurt her was gone from the world. She had already moved past him, built a life so full of love and purpose that he was just a shadow from her past, powerless to touch her present. By 1890, Isaac and Catherine's ranch was thriving. They had expanded their herd and hired several hands of their own, creating the kind of operation Isaac had always dreamed of running. Samuel was 11 years old, already showing signs of becoming an excellent horseman, and Rose was 9, bright and curious and full of life. Catherine had started teaching both children their letters and numbers, drawing on those old dreams of becoming a teacher, and she discovered she had a gift for education. The small schoolhouse in Leadville was struggling to keep up with the town's growth, and when they needed another teacher, Catherine volunteered. At first, she was nervous about standing before a classroom, worried that someone might see her scar and judge her. But Isaac encouraged her, reminding her that she had overcome so much already and that she had valuable knowledge to share. Catherine became beloved by her students and their families, known for her patience and dedication. She taught with the passion of someone who understood how education could change lives, how knowledge could be its own form of freedom. The scar remained hidden beneath high collars, but it no longer felt like a brand of shame. It was simply a part of her history, a reminder of what she had survived. In 1892, Catherine became pregnant again, a surprise blessing that delighted the entire family. At 32, she worried about the risks, but the pregnancy progressed smoothly, and she delivered twin boys that summer. They named them Henry and James, and the household erupted into joyful chaos with 4 children filling every corner with noise and laughter. Isaac, now 39, still worked the ranch with the same dedication he had shown as a young cowboy, but his focus had shifted. His greatest pride was not in the size of his herd or the success of his business, but in the family he and Catherine had built together. He would sit on the porch in the evenings, watching Catherine teach the children or listening to their laughter, and feel a contentment so deep it brought tears to his eyes. One evening, after the children were finally asleep and the house was quiet, Catherine and Isaac sat together on that same porch, wrapped in blankets against the autumn chill. The years had been kind to them both, adding lines to their faces but also a depth to their love that only time could create. "You remember the first time we talked?" Catherine asked, her head resting on Isaac's shoulder. "On the porch of the boarding house." "I remember everything about that night," Isaac said, pressing a kiss to her hair. "I remember thinking you were the most beautiful woman I had ever seen and being terrified you would send me away." "I almost did," Catherine admitted. "I was so scared of letting anyone close, of letting anyone see the damage Mitchell had done. But something about you made me want to try." "I am glad you did," Isaac said softly. "You gave me everything I ever wanted, Catherine. A home, a family, a purpose. You made me whole." Catherine lifted her head to look at him, her green eyes still as bright as they had been the day they met. "We made each other whole," she corrected. "You gave me back my life, Isaac. You gave me hope when I thought I had none left. You looked at my scars and saw beauty. That is a gift I can never repay." "You do not need to repay it," Isaac said, cupping her face gently. "Loving you is the easiest thing I have ever done." They kissed, a tender connection that held 13 years of love and partnership, and when they finally drew apart, both were smiling. The past was behind them, its power broken by time and healing. The future stretched ahead, full of promise and possibility, and they would face it together as they had faced everything else. With courage, with love, and with the unshakable knowledge that they belonged to each other not through brands or ownership, but through choice and commitment. Their children grew into fine adults, each carrying forward the values Isaac and Catherine had instilled in them. Samuel took over the ranch when Isaac finally decided to retire, running it with the same fairness and dedication his father had shown. Rose became a teacher like her mother, opening a school in a nearby town and making education accessible to children who might otherwise have gone without. The twins, Henry and James, went into business together, starting a freight company that prospered as Colorado continued to grow and develop. Isaac and Catherine lived to see their grandchildren born, delighting in the new generation and the continuation of the family they had built from love and determination. They celebrated their 40th wedding anniversary in 1919, surrounded by children and grandchildren, and a community that loved and respected them both. Catherine passed away peacefully in her sleep in 1921, at the age of 61, with Isaac holding her hand. The scar on her shoulder blade, faded now with age, remained a testament to what she had endured and overcome. At her funeral, Isaac stood before the gathered crowd and spoke of his wife's courage, her kindness, her strength. He told the story of how they had met, how she had survived something unspeakable and had still found the capacity to love and trust again. "She was marked by cruelty," Isaac said, his voice breaking with emotion, "but she defined herself through courage and love. She showed me that scars do not determine our worth, that we are more than the worst things that have happened to us." Catherine Porter Donovan was the bravest person I ever knew, and loving her was the greatest privilege of my life. Isaac lived 3 more years, long enough to see all his children settled and happy, long enough to hold his first great-grandchild. He passed away in his sleep in 1924 at the age of 71 and was buried beside Catherine under the Colorado sky they had both loved. Their story became legend in the family, passed down through generations as a reminder of the power of love to heal and transform. The details of Catherine's branding and escape, once sources of shame and pain, became instead a testament to her strength and Isaac's devotion. Their descendants spoke with pride of the couple who had overcome cruelty and fear to build something beautiful, who had proven that love could triumph over even the darkest circumstances. The ranch remained in the family for generations, a physical reminder of what Isaac and Catherine had built together. And though the world changed around it, though the wild frontier gave way to civilization and progress, the legacy of their love endured, a bright thread woven through the fabric of family history. In the end, Jerome Mitchell's attempt to brand Catherine as property had failed completely. The mark on her skin had healed into a scar, but it never defined her. She was defined instead by her courage in escaping, by her willingness to trust and love again, by the family she raised and the students she taught, and the community she served. She was defined by the life she chose to live, not by the violence that had been done to her. And Isaac kept his promise, made in a bunkhouse on a cold October night when he first traced that brand with gentle fingers. He had sworn revenge, but the revenge he took was not violent or bloody. It was quieter and far more powerful. He gave Catherine a life of love and safety, showed her every day that she was precious and valued, and helped her build a future so bright that the darkness of her past could not touch it. That was the greatest revenge of all, refusing to let cruelty win, choosing love over hate, building happiness from the ashes of trauma. Isaac and Catherine's love story was not defined by the moment of violence that had scarred her, but by the thousands of moments of tenderness and devotion that followed. It was a love story that proved healing was possible, that scars could fade, that broken things could be made whole again through patience and care and unwavering commitment. Their children remembered them as partners in the truest sense, two people who had faced the world together and emerged victorious. Their grandchildren knew them as loving presences who always had time for stories and encouragement. Their community remembered them as pillars of strength and kindness, people who made the world around them better through their actions. And somewhere in all those memories and stories, the scar on Catherine's shoulder blade became just one small part of a much larger narrative, a reminder that even the cruelest acts cannot destroy the human spirit if love is there to catch us when we fall. Isaac Donovan had caught Catherine Porter when she was falling, and together they had built something that lasted far beyond their own lifetimes, a legacy of love that echoed through generations and proved that, in the end, love always wins.